A person's greatness begins in their thoughts. This timeless truth shows up again and again in the lives of successful people like Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, and Jeff Bezos. Napoleon Hill wrote in his famous book, Think and Grow Rich, that what you think about, you become. But if that's true, why do so many people still struggle to succeed? Do they not imagine their future or fail to see their own potential? Today's story will uncover the answers to these questions and teach a powerful lesson along the way. We'll also learn a few useful words to improve our English, so stay with us till the end. I promise this video will be worth your time. Once in a busy railway station, there lived a beggar. Every day he survived by asking passengers for alms as they waited for their trains. He had learned the posture of asking so well that it had become the story he told himself, that he was helpless, that he had nothing to offer. He sat on the same cracked tile, his faded coat a kind of uniform, and when trains roared past, he watched strangers hurry by with faces set to schedules and plans. His days blended into one another until a single question shifted the current of his life. A well-dressed businessman once stepped onto the platform. He walked with calm assurance, and the beggar, eyeing his polished shoes and steady stride, assumed generosity would follow. The beggar extended his hand as he always did, and the businessman paused. Instead of dropping a coin into the outstretched palm, he looked the beggar in the eye and asked, "Do you ever give anything to someone?" It was not a rebuke so much as a challenge to the beggar's imagination. The beggar had never been asked that before. He muttered that he was a beggar, that he survived by asking, that he had nothing to offer. The businessman nodded and said, "People respond to a sense of exchange. If you offer nothing, why should they give?" Those words lodged in the beggar's heart like a seed. That night, as he lay on a thin pallet beneath an overhang, he made dua quietly and pondered what little he could give. He thought of his hands, weathered but steady. He thought of the wild growth along the tracks. He remembered a quiet proverb his grandmother used to say, "Blessings move toward the one who strives with sincere intent in the stillness." A small possibility took root. 2 days later, as he sat watching the world pass, the beggar noticed a cluster of wildflowers by the iron rails, small, brave blooms in the dusty edge of the station. They were not valuable in coin, but they were living and beautiful. An idea took root. The next morning, he picked a few, arranging them as carefully as his trembling fingers would allow, and when a passenger handed him a coin, he offered a flower in return. The change in the air was immediate. People accepted the flowers with surprise and warmth. A weary commuter paused. A student tucked a bloom in her notebook. An elderly woman smiled and placed it behind her ear. The exchanges lengthened into small conversations. The beggar listened, and when people spoke kindly, he thanked Allah in his heart. He made niyyah, to work honestly, to give sincerely, and to trust that risk comes from Allah. A Muslim's life is shaped by intention and trust. The beggar cultivated ikhlas, sincerity, offering his flowers without show, without complaints. He tucked away a little of each day's earnings and used the rest to buy a few more stems. He learned the rhythm of effort and reliance, tawakkul without passivity, action without arrogance. In time, he ordered small bunches from a market vendor and began trading in a modest, honest way. Word of his flowers spread slowly. The businessman who had posed the question returned one day and found the beggar neatly set up with a small basket. He bought several bunches, smiling, as he recognized the change, not only in the man's work, but in his bearing. "You have discovered the law of exchange," the businessman said. "But more than that, you have changed how you see yourself." That endorsement emboldened the man. He treated the small stand as a business, neatly arranging petals, greeting customers with respect, and keeping accounts in his head. When rain ruined a batch or a slow afternoon tested him, he did not sink into despair. He made dua, remembered the Prophet's teachings about patient perseverance, and set about repairing or replacing his stock. He practiced patience and found that persistence, when joined with prayer and honest labor, often produced unexpected openings. 6 months later, he had saved enough to rent a modest stall near the market. He hired a young helper and bought flowers in bulk. He still remembered his first trembling hands and the small wildflowers that had started it all, and he paid forward. Sometimes he gave extra blooms to elderly customers. Sometimes he offered a few coins to those struggling. The circle of giving widened and generated barakah, blessing, in ways he could not have calculated. His transformation taught others at the station an enduring lesson. Dignity begins in the way one thinks about oneself. People noticed how his posture had changed, no longer a man who only received, but a man who offered, served, and managed. He would often tell anyone who listened, "The change began when I told myself I could give." In his heart, he credited Allah for guidance and for opening doors, but he also took responsibility for his efforts and the discipline that followed. If you take one practical step from this tale, and let it be this: begin each day with a clear niyyah. Offer what small good you can, act with honesty, and trust Allah for the rest. Small, steady actions compounded by prayer and patience often yield outcomes far beyond imagination. This story carries a message older than commerce. Our thoughts shape our destiny. The beggar's shift from a posture of helplessness to one of contribution altered both his outer life and his inner state. The Islamic nuance, the niyyah, the tawakkul, the ikhlas, the sabr, gave his efforts a moral axis. When he paired sincere intention with persistent work, risk came in forms both subtle and visible. Greatness is not measured solely by wealth, but by the courage to reimagine oneself and the humility to serve others. The man who had once sat with an outstretched palm became a giver who received more than money. He received dignity, purpose, and community. When thoughts change, actions follow. When actions follow, lives are remade. And with a grateful heart turned to Allah, even the smallest beginning can grow into a life of quiet abundance.